what was your role personally within your...
I was trained as an airframe mechanic, which meant servicing a squadron of aircraft. We were known as riggers because it was a transport squadron, and within their role they used to do air supply dropping, they used to do paratroop dropping. They also used to go on air relief and air sea rescue. While I was out there, there was some major floods in Baghdad, in the Baghdad region. I think it was the Euphrates actually overflowed, and we flew out tents and blankets and food supplies and all that sort of thing. So our role on there was to keep changing these aircraft from one role to another almost weekly, you know, to do different jobs.
And what was the feeling like? I mean, what was your sense of danger, or did it feel like it was building up to something sort of on a day-to-day basis? What sort of danger were you in?
Well, the real problem started around about the beginning of 1951, which was 2 years earlier. That was when the rise of Egyptian nationalism first began to catch the imagination. And it did get very, very, very bad. It got quite bad to the point where there was a major town in Egypt called Ismailia, and the Egyptian authorities, who on one hand, governmental level, were negotiating, you know, for the British to leave. But you see, the government line, the Egyptian government line, was not always followed by everybody else, because there were various factions. There was the hardcore nationalists. There were a group called the Bulak Nizam, which was another group. There was what you see today actually is the hardcore Islamists as well. And these didn't necessarily see eye to eye with the government, their government, who they thought was rather weak. So there was all other little groups of paramilitaries setting themselves up out there with the intent of persuading us to go by attacking the bases and individuals. And that included, you must remember, married families. They were there too, so they were under threat as well.
So by the time you got there a couple of years later, these groups must have been quite entrenched and were...
Oh, they certainly were entrenched, but the problem hadn't gone away, and it was going to carry on until a peace arrangement or an agreement was hammered out in 1954 that actually settled the problem, which was the preamble to our going in 1955.
So how safe were you on the base?
While you were working, I can't speak for every base and camp because they varied in size and also how important they were as targets. Now, an RAF base is obviously very important because of the aircraft, which can be blown up. But while you was on the airfield, working away on these dispersals, you felt reasonably safe because you were encompassed by all people doing jobs and vehicles and one thing and another. But the problem came when you had to go on guard at night. That's when the Egyptians, or the militant Egyptians, felt that they could get back at us by picking these sentries off. Our particular camp, we used to put on 100 guards a night. But that wasn't the only problem. See, the other thing was that sooner or later you couldn't live in a confined existence like that. You wanted to go out. So you went out to the local village, Fayed, down the road, and that's about as far as you could go. The rest of the canal zone was out of bounds.
So what was happening to people if they strayed out of the safe area?
The anomaly was that if you went out on duty, if you was, say, had to go to another camp or somewhere and you took a vehicle and you either was an armed driver, but everybody had to have an escort, an armed escort as well. Also remember that children were being taken to school on service buses as well, which also had to have. So they were at risk. They were at risk from hand grenades being thrown in, which is why they put the wire netting over the tops of the open type trucks. And on a personal level, you were also obviously prone to attack when you went out. As I say, the anomaly was that when you went out on duty, you could legitimately draw a weapon to protect yourself. When you went out in civvies, you were not allowed to. So you had to, well, you just had to get on with it. So the most common thing that was happening were stabbings, weren't it, Bill? Stabbings and personal attacks from these people who were generally hiding on the side of the road or wherever.